Hello and welcome to Big Picture. I am Vishal Dahiya and today we will talk about judiciary and corruption. Now, in a first of its kind decision, in 28 years, Chief Justice of India Ranjan Gogoi has allowed the CBI to file a corruption case against Justice S.N. Shukla, who is a sitting judge of the Lucknow bench of Allahabad High Court. Former CJI Deepak Mishra had ordered a preliminary inquiry against Justice Shukla over allegations that he had made handwritten changes in his own bench's order days after the Supreme Court termed the High Court from allowing the Lucknow-based GCRG Institute of Medical Sciences to admit students for the 2017-18 session. Now, the three-judge panel had found him guilty of the charges. Prosecution of judges of High Court and Supreme Court was not allowed till July 1991 when the top court provided for lodging FIR against them in the landmark Veeraswamy case. Now, Justice Veeraswamy of the Madras High Court, who had been booked in a case of corruption in 1976, had challenged the government's decision to prosecute him. In 1991, his matter reached the Supreme Court, which then allowed prosecution of judges of Supreme Court and High Court after getting the nod from Chief Justice of India. For more on this, we're joined by a distinguished panel of guests today. Let me start by introducing those guests to you, beginning with Mr. Deshratna Nigam, Advocate of the Supreme Court of India. We also have with us Dr. Justice Satish Chandra, former judge of Allahabad High Court, and we have Mr. Satya Prakash, the legal editor of the Tribune. Let me begin with you only, Satya, and let's try and put things in perspective for our viewers out here. One, about this particular case, and two, since I referred to the 1991 judgment, how are these things related?
Well, before 1991, there was no bar on police or the CBI for registering any case against any judge. And because, as you mentioned in the opening remarks, Justice Veeraswamy had challenged the registration of case against him. The matter went to the Supreme Court, and finally the Supreme Court ruled that in case any police agency wants to register a case against a sitting judge of a High Court or the Supreme Court, they have to seek sort of permission from the CJI. In case of CJI himself, it is for the government to consult the Supreme Court judges, a judge or judges. This is the crux of the Veeraswamy case judgment. Okay. Apart from that, there were some other issues. The Supreme Court declared that judges are public servants and all. But the main issue was regarding whether any investigative agency can register a case, a criminal case against a sitting judge or not. And this was important because if there is no sort of scrutiny before they register a case, it would have, in a way affected the independence of the judiciary, because if the executive wanted, they could have asked the CBI to register a case against a sitting judge, and that would have disturbed the, independence.
So the investigative agencies report to the executive.
Yes. So that was the, thereafter, this is the first case in which the Supreme Court has, or rather CJI has allowed the CBI to register a case.
Okay.
So that way it's important. So far as this case is concerned, as again you have already set out the facts of this case, the judge in question, Justice Shukla, he, after the Supreme Court's verdict, he made certain changes. He allowed admission to take place for a particular academic session, 2017-18, for that medical college. That was against the Supreme Court verdict. And that was done, and after the investigation, he has been indicted. So now there is a fit case for his removal also, because two consecutive Chief Justices, they have written to the government, or rather Prime Minister, that proceedings for his removal must be initiated.
Okay. So that in itself is the crux of the case, and what you pointed out is that there is a proper procedure which was put in place in 1991 judgment. Let me bring in Justice Chandra here. Justice Chandra, this is quite significant because after 91, a gap of 28 years since first case has been registered against a sitting judge. One, what does this signify? And two, what are the ramifications here?
After the 1991, if you will recall, there was the Delhi Judicial Officers versus State of Gujarat, where a SHO has bind up this CJM in the police station, and drinking was leaving in and charges were framed. And matter reached to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, it's all right, you can do, but take the prior permission from the Chief Justice of the concerning High Court, or in case of the High Court, take the permission from the Chief Justice of India, who is the head of the institutions. So this protection was provided.
By showing them all the evidence.
Yeah, by showing the evidence and just take the permission, only then that can be arrested or that can be detained. So that protection was given already. So in this case also, the CGI has already seen the report of the panel and also the PE which was filed earlier, and that material was placed note before the CGI and permission was given. As far as the action is taken against the sitting judge, and that was in the case of the Kannan, who was sent to the jail in the contempt by the court itself, and Supreme Court ordered that he should be medically examined. There is no provision like that, but he was this order was passed. So action can be taken against the sitting judge also, though for removal procedure is already there, that is the impeachment. But unfortunately or fortunately, not a single case has been done in the impeachment act.
Okay, but specifically, if you look at the corruption case, you mentioned Justice Kannan's case as well. But if you look at the issue of corruption, this is the first indictment. Specifically, if you look at not indictment, as in the case being registered against a sitting judge.
This is a case registered, and after collecting the evidence or investigation, only then it can be set out.
Okay.
Before that, we can't say.
Okay, let's bring in Mr. Deshutan Nigam here. Mr. Nigam, your views on, again, the same question, as in ramifications and significance. How does it, what does it signify basically?
See, it's a balance between prosecution for corruption and maintaining independence of judiciary. It is something that a lot of cases of corruptions have been reported, but no action was being taken. And therefore, this mechanism has been devised in Veeraswamy's case after 1991, how to go about it. Although we have impeachment provisions in the constitution, however, that's a very elaborate process, but that is only for removal from the post, but not for the punishment for corruption. Those are two different things. And if you look at the Judges Protection Act of 1985, which also gives power to the central state government and the Supreme Court to take appropriate action. So that provision was till now not utilized, and although there is a protection given in section 77 of IPC also, that they are immune for doing any judicial act done in good faith, but this is not done in good faith if it is proven. So and there is a scrutiny also, a very detailed scrutiny, one in this case in the form of preliminary inquiry by the CBI. Thereafter, the panel of the Supreme Court has scrutinized it and given a report, and then a decision has been taken. So there are checks and balances if you look at it, and then only one can proceed. And the work he will remain suspended, work will be withdrawn. The removal will only takes place when he is found guilty. So therefore, the appropriate checks and balances are there. It is significant to curb corruption in the judiciary, and this has sent the right kind of signal both to the higher judiciary and the lower judiciary. Please beware.
Okay, Satya, in terms of sending that message, as Deshutan is pointing out, to the entire judiciary and to the general public at large, that this is a fit case which describes that balance between taking action against those who are found guilty in corruption cases and also maintaining the independence of the judiciary.
Well, that's the crux of the Veeraswamy case. But before that, I would like to correct is not the right word, but clarify that the procedure for impeachment under the Indian Constitution is only for President under Article 61. Judges are not impeached, judges are removed, and that procedure is prescribed under Article 124.
Okay.
The impeachment word is used only for President and nobody else. But coming back to this case and the balance required between independence of judiciary and weeding out the black sheep from the judiciary, it's important. Why? Because in the last few decades, there have been several cases in which the judiciary or even the legislature, they have been forced to initiate the procedure. Before this, in this case, as I have told you, Justice Deepak Mishra, Chief Justice, he had written to the government for Justice Sukla's removal. Thereafter, it has been repeated by the current CJI, Justice Gogoi. He has also written to the government that this gentleman should be removed as a judge. But that apart, these are not the two cases. There are several cases in which either the CJI took the initiative. In case of Justice Soumitra Sen, it was the then CJI, Justice K.G. Balakrishnan, who wrote to the then Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, that Justice Soumitra Sen should be removed. Before that, there have been several cases, or around that time, there was a case of Justice Dinakaran. And then there was some other cases also in which, in fact, there was only one case in which somehow the judiciary or the senior judges managed to convince Justice Samit Mukherjee that he should quit. He quit and then CBI probe followed. But he, in a way, that was avoided. Why? Because the senior judges managed to convince him. But in most of the cases, judges who are sought to be removed, they refuse to budge and they continue till the end.
Okay.
The irony is that the process of removal is such in India, it's so cumbersome that no judge has been removed since the constitution it came into being. The procedure, there are several layers of checks and balances, and I'm not saying that the checks and balances provided for in the constitution, they are wrong. They were very well intentioned. Why? Because it was to ensure the independence of judiciary. But what has happened in the last several decades is that it has ensured that no judge, even if found guilty, indicted by the committee appointed by the Rajya Sabha chairperson or Lok Sabha speaker, as the case may be, because the impeachment proceeding, it can be initiated in either house. If in case of Lok Sabha, there has to be 100 members, in case of Rajya Sabha, 50 members.
50 members.
And thereafter, a committee is appointed in which a Supreme Court judge, a High Court Chief Justice and an eminent jurist are there. In this case also, once the procedure starts, the same procedure will be followed under the Judges Inquiry Act 1968. But the procedure is so cumbersome that no judge has ever been impeached. What is needed is change in the procedure. You need to change it, and how it can be changed. I'm not saying, because in the ultimate analysis, removal of a judge is a political process. It's a political decision because it goes to the legislature, and there the elected members, they take a call. And if you remember, in Justice Ramaswamy's case, the Congress party, then they refused to take, they walked out, and then the motion could not be carried. In case of Justice Soumitra Sen, one house had passed and thereafter he resigned because he could easily guess that he is going to be removed, so he didn't want to face that. He resigned. In Justice Dinakaran's case also, he resigned. I am saying, why can't we have a process which is less cumbersome and which in a way ensures a balance between removal of a corrupt judge, and it also, at the same time, it also ensures that the independence of judiciary is maintained.
Okay.
As we see today, in the last 70 years, whatever, almost 70 years experience, it tells us that the procedure for removal of a judge has proved to be faulty, and there is a need for correction.
Okay, I'll come to you, Mr. Nigam, but since we are speaking about the entire process of removal of a judge, and Justice Chandra, do you agree with what Mr. Satyaprakash is pointing out, that the process needs to be made less cumbersome? Yes, it is part of the checks and balances, but it needs to be made less cumbersome.
I agree with him. Since from the very beginning, Elijah Imphe was there was a procedure to remove him, but he could not be removed due to this complicated procedure, first time. And since then, as he rightly said, not a single judge has been removed by the parliament. So this is there. Judges Inquiry Act is there, 1968, you can amend it, suitably you can amend it, and then matter can be sorted out.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Nigam?
See, let me tell you one thing. We have to make a distinction here. One is the constitutional disciplinary action. One is a criminal prosecution for punishment.
And this case is criminal prosecution for punishment.
So what you see in the constitution is a kind of a civil constitutional action for removing on the post. But where is the punishment? So this is in addition to that. And I don't agree that the process of the parliament should be made less cumbersome. It has to remain like that so that the independence of the judiciary is maintained, so that political parties, not at their own whims and fancies, are able to remove the judges like that, so that this aspect of punishment is in addition to what the constitutional provisions are there, and which were not there earlier. So which there was a bar, and therefore in order to maintain the independence of judiciary, the permission from CJI is required. So punishment and the constitutional provisions are two different things.
Okay. Yes,
Punishment was already given in this case.
So in this case,
and punishment, as I said earlier, the Justice Kanan case was there, the punishment was given to him.
But these two are separate procedures, as Mr. Nigam is pointing out. One is for criminal prosecution, the other is for removal.
That's fine.
Here is also a case of the forgery.
I am saying, supposing This gentleman is, as the CJI has allowed the CBI to proceed, so cases are registered and then investigated, charge sheet is filed, and he is convicted also. But he continues to be a judge. Why? Because he is not removed. So there is a contradiction and there is a dichotomy. If you allow the criminal prosecution to go ahead and the person in question, that is a sitting judge of a high court and who is holding a constitutional position, he is convicted, and can you send him to jail without removing him? So there is a contradiction that needs to be sorted out, and that is why I said, in case you are allowing prosecution and the person is to be convicted, and then can the person continue to be a judge of the High Court? Okay. And that is why there is a need to make this process or procedure less cumbersome. I am not saying there should not be checks and balances. In fact, the checks and balances are already there, because the committee which is set up by the Rajya Sabha chairperson or the Lok Sabha speaker, as the case may be, that committee will have a Supreme Court judge, a sitting High Court judge, and an eminent jurist. And they first take a call, and thereafter it goes to Parliament, and then Parliament takes a call. And that too, 2/3 majority. There can be, I am saying, you can have a kind of committee in which the judges have, there are more number of judges and less number of political representatives. But this, I am not suggesting that it should be this or that. I am just pointing out and underlining the fact that the current procedure, it's so cumbersome that we have failed to remove even a single judge, despite the judge in question being indicted by an inquiry in which all three persons are having judicial back.
But the counter argument, as Mr. Nigam is pointing out, is the fact that, the very fact that this might seem cumbersome is what makes it, ensure that the independence of the judiciary is maintained. Justice Chandra.
As far as against the sitting judge, criminal case is there, I will repeat again the Kannan case. He was a sitting judge and he was sentenced. So this is the precedent which is available in the book of law. Why you are not making it into a codification amendment? Make it a law. Similarly here, the inquiry order was there. Why not make a law? That CJI can order for the inquiry and like this. So statute is to be created, enacted, or you can say the modified, that Judges Inquiry Act.
And that is for the legislature.
Just one point, Justice Karnan's case, I am a critique of that case, because effectively, power to remove a judge in the ultimate analysis, it lies with Parliament. So in this case, in Karnan's case, in a way, the Supreme Court indirectly usurped that power. He was a judge, and by a judicial order, he was convicted of contempt, and then he had to go. In fact, he vanished. And after his retirement, he was arrested. And there was a deliberate decision not to arrest him till the time he continued to be a judge. Because had he been removed by a process which is prescribed in the Judges Inquiry Act, that would have taken much more time. Much
longer.
But yes, I am saying to remove a judge, this is indirect removal of a judge. So contempt, can the contempt power under Article 129 of the Constitution of the Supreme Court, contempt power of the Supreme Court be used in such a manner that a sitting judge of a High Court, or tomorrow it could be a sitting judge of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court has set a bad precedent, and I expect them not to repeat it.
Mr. Nigam.
So let me tell you, in a parliamentary democracy, Parliament is supreme. It's a legislative body, and that legislation has to come from the Parliament. I agree with Satya that that's a bad precedent, because the usurping the power, this was never intended in the Constitution. That power removal has to be with the elected representatives. If the judges start removing the other judges, you can understand what kind of a chaos could be. It could be lobbying, it could be, groupism inside the judiciary itself.
And if any change has to be made to that procedure, as Justice Chandra has pointed out, it is to be made by the legislature.
Legislature, and then Parliament is the supreme body to take action against judges.
One more important aspect here, Justice Chandra, and since it's not the first time that we have heard this several times, and in fact, former CJI has also pointed it, several other judges have also pointed out the issue of corruption vis-a-vis judiciary. So you yourself has been part of the judiciary for quite a long time. How serious is the problem out there, and how this can be tackled? Will this be considered the first step to go ahead and do that?
I can't say about that one, because that is judiciary inside, and but they are human beings like others. Judges are also human beings. So can't say about them. It depends on individual, what he's doing, what he's not doing.
Okay.
Maybe in Supreme Court, maybe in High Court also, and maybe in lower judiciary. So corruption is there, no doubt.
And there are instances, and there
There
is
are instances.
there is
Even
there
the
is a
Supreme Court
specific-
judges' instances are there.
Yes.
Okay.
Former Chief Justice of India were involved in corruption charges.
So there needs to be, action which needs to be initiated in that cases as well, Mr. Nigam.
Yeah, sure. That is why I said they have maintained a distinction between constitutional provisions and criminal prosecution for punishment. And this should act as a deterrent. See, one of the primary motive of the law is to act as a deterrent so that future crimes do not take place. So this is, I think, in the right direction, but there are certain gray areas. Finally, if he is convicted, I think the removal ultimately should lie with the parliament to take this conviction into account and then remove. Maybe it's a formality only, but the ultimate power should lie with the parliament.
Okay, but that is what exactly, as you were pointing out, in parliamentary democracy is the right
Yeah.
of the elected representatives. Satya?
What we are not discussing is the appointment of judges. What has happened?
I just missed it. Thank you for doing it.
It
Yeah,
all
everything
depends-
leads back to that point.
Yes.
Because why do we need to remove a judge? Because in the first place, it was a bad appointment. And who appoints judges? It is the
Judges.
collegium which appoints
Judges
judges.
themselves.
So in the ultimate analysis, the fault lies with the collegium system. And unfortunately, the attempt taken by Parliament in 2014, National NJAC Act, the Supreme Court chose to strike it down, and the related constitutional amendment also was declared unconstitutional. Ideally, they should have given it a chance, and had it been experimented, perhaps it would have proved to be better than the collegium system, where
Okay.
it's very difficult for them because they don't have any system. Despite the Supreme Court's verdict in 2015, October 2015 and December 2015, there were two Constitution Bench verdicts relating to NJAC. They said they should have a secretariat to assist the collegium. But in the last 4 years, there is no secretariat. So they function as if their main function is judicial function. But the administrative function, and that too appointment of judges,
Okay.
it's a kind of part-time job they are doing. So the quality of appointment will always suffer, and particularly because they are not allowing the executive to say anything. So they have completely usurped the power, and then the bad appointments taking place. Justice Karnan, Justice Dinakaran, all sorts of cases
And
are there.
the recent case as
Not
well.
just this, there are cases in which deserving candidates are ignored for whatever reasons.
Okay.
And thereafter, we continue to debate in the media and academia and blah blah blah.
Okay,
This is
let me
But,
have this one
appointments-
to Justice Chandra. Justice Chandra, do you agree that because both things are related as well? Once a judge is appointed, if it turns out to be a bad decision, then a final result would be something like this, what we are discussing today.
At the time of appointment, due scrutiny is done by the government as well as by the judiciary.
Yes.
And there is no guarantee that after the commission's appointment, National High Judicial Commission appointments, person will remain the honest. See the example of so many IAS who were selected by the UPSC and later on they were become these corrupt persons, and most corrupt person also in UP. You have seen. So after joining the judiciary, what he will do, it depends on that person's.
Okay.
And I agree partly that at the beginning we can check more carefully about his selection.
Okay. Mr. Nigam?
I fully agree with Satya with both appointment and removal of judges should not be with judges. You are not supposed to appoint yourself, because then the independence of the judiciary and the fairness and the element of bias cannot be eliminated. It should be with the executive, with the control of the parliament, some provision for the control of parliament. Now, even today also, there is a system of check and balance. Suppose there is a concept of pocket veto by the president. Now the recommendation goes to the president. Finally, he has to sign it. He keeps it. There is no time frame in all the three cases, judges case 1, judges case 2 or judges case 3, which says it has to be returned within the time frame by the president. So that check and balances has yet not been exercised by the president, and that can be a very effective remedy if some kind of bad appointment is being made and there are certain provisions. Today the provision is that it has to be returned to the collegium, and when collegium says you do it, if it again sends it to the government, they have to do it. But here President can exercise its pocket veto and keep it, and just it is like killing the proposal.
Okay. Final concluding words from you.
In fact, there is a petition pending in the Supreme Court challenging this pocket veto, that there should be a time frame within which, once the collegium has cleared it, or second time it has sent it to the government must issue the warrant of appointment within a fixed time frame. That is the petition pending before the Supreme Court. If they do it, if they fix it, so even the pocket veto goes.
Okay.
I am saying the checks and balances, that system must be there. Here, that balance has been completely destroyed because the judiciary has completely usurped that power. There is a need to restore that balance. Once that balance is restored, an appointment system is improved, we may not have many cases for removal, and you will have better judges going to the Supreme Court and High Courts.
Okay. Before we conclude, final words
I
from
agree
you.
that there is a need that some enactment must be there
Okay.
for check and balance and for stop the practices in future, such type of instances.
Okay. Mr. Nigam?
I think the need of the hour is to strengthen the judiciary, its independence, and Parliament must have the final say on this matter.
Okay, so there it is, Justice Shukla's case in which the CJI has given a decision after 28 years. First such decision has once again put the matter in public domain, and as our panelists are also pointing out, in a parliamentary democracy, it is ultimately the right of the people's representatives, those who are sitting in the parliament, the members of parliament, to go ahead and take a final decision on such matters, maybe tweak the present laws, make new ones, or strengthen the existing ones as well. We'll come back again tomorrow with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.